do. I felt it was appropriate for us at least to take a moment and acknowledge the horrible shooting that took place late last night, early this morning in Las Vegas. Lots of Nashville and Tennessee connections to that shooting. I'm sure we'll hear more as the days go by. And I guess I would just say to the elected officials in this room, it's up to y'all to decide if this is the kind of place we're going to be. On a lighter note, we are joined today by our sister city, Tamworth, Australia. Their mayor, Carl Murray, Council General Manager Paul Bennett, and Director of Business and Community John Summerlin. So I was meant to meet with them in about 25 minutes. I'm pretty sure we're not going to be done then. So welcome to Nashville and enjoy a presentation about our That's more applause than I've ever gotten. So with that, we did meet earlier this year to get sort of a sketch of where we were headed, potentially in terms of an agreement between the Major League Soccer proponents and the city of Nashville. At that point in time, it was represented that they were working hard and hoped to reach an agreement. And so with that, I will ask Mayor Megan Barry if she'll come forward, and this is her opportunity to let us know what's happened.
Sure. Yeah, you got me. Thank you, Vice Mayor Briley, for inviting me to come today. And council members, thank you for welcoming me into this chamber. I feel the need to recognize all of you. Okay, never mind. So before I begin, I would just like to also echo Vice Mayor Briley's comments about Las Vegas and the victims there. Clearly, there is so much support here for those victims, the close ties that we have with country music and the country music community. And my heart goes out to the elected leaders in Las Vegas and in Nevada as they deal with this horrible, horrible tragedy. It hits very close to home, and I know it affects all of us. So, it is great to be back here. I look longingly at John Cooper's seat, where I spent a good bit of time, and I know that you all have a hard job, and you spend a lot of your time thinking through always about what's best for Nashville and being committed to making sure that the people of Nashville are taken care of. So I thank you for that. You know, when I ran back in 2015, I made a commitment to the people of Nashville that we would honor the vote that took place in 2011 by investing in the Fairgrounds property to make sure that we realized its full potential while also preserving all of the existing uses that it had. And then in 2016, I proposed, and all of you approved, a significant investment in the fairgrounds, $15 million for maintenance and upgrades at that facility, as well as to create some community soccer fields out there and to let that double as parking during some of our major events. Also this year, the Board of Fair Commissioners issued a longer-term RFP to operate the racetrack. So instead of that year-to-year contract that had been there before, it was a 5-year award. And that was done as a way to encourage more private investment and maintenance in the operations of the facility. And now we have another opportunity. With the visionary leadership and the generous support of John Ingram and his fellow investors in the effort to bring Major League Soccer to Nashville, we have an opportunity to even further activate and improve the fairgrounds. And this is going to benefit generations of Nashvillians to come. And that is what we're here today to present to you. So I'm going to kick it off, but then there's going to be a lot of other folks who are going to spend some time talking about this. This is a more fully realized vision for the Fairgrounds property with respects to the will of the voters back in 2011, who said that they wanted to make sure we preserved the existing usages, racing, the fair, the flea market, but we also aligned with the growing neighborhood and making sure that as this evolved near downtown, we were caring for that as well. John Ingram and his fellow investors in MLS to Nashville are committing hundreds of millions of dollars, their own dollars, to secure a franchise, to build a stadium, and making sure that they are safeguarding taxpayers in the process. In fact, 90% of this stadium will be paid for or financed through private dollars and revenues generated from the facility. 90%. Make no mistake, this is a tremendous benefit to our city and to the community of Nashville. John and his team really do care about our city, and they believe as we move toward the momentum of soccer that this will give Nashvillians another chance to have a major league team that the city can come behind, rally behind, get behind, just like we do the Titans and the Predators. And I think we are absolutely ready for this. Nashville is a soccer city. We had more than 100,000 fans come out for those two big matches that we had this year at Nissan Stadium this summer. And we're also an international city. We are a city who is full of people that, whether they were born in the United States or whether they came here from another country, have grown up playing soccer. Our kids play soccer, and it is the world's most popular sport. Major League Soccer has been very impressed by what they have seen when they have come here in recent months. Now we just have to have that stadium for our pitch to make an MLS franchise a possibility. Under this proposal, which you're going to hear more about, Metro will supply the land for the stadium and will be investing in infrastructure on the site to fully realize the Fairgrounds master plan. The master plan reorients roads and it efficiently manages the space that's on that site. It means we're going to construct new expo facilities that are going to improve and enhance events like the flea market and Christmas Village. I know that those events are very dear to many Nashvillians' hearts, and we're going to improve them. We're also proposing that Metro allow the investment group to activate some underutilized space in this property, and that can be better used for mixed use, mixed income development to help further strengthen that neighborhood. Now, I think that this represents a new model. I think it represents a better model for how cities can work with sports teams to give residents an entertainment outlet and another team to rally behind, while also making sure that we have private investment and safeguard taxpayers. You know, times have changed. Taxpayers want the funding burden for sports stadiums and arenas to be more heavily shouldered by the owners and the investors. And let me put this in perspective for you. In 1996, we built an NFL stadium, and close to 75% of those costs were paid for by local and state dollars. Debt service on Bridgestone Arena is primarily funded by Metro, and First Tennessee Park is financed with tax increment financing and general fund revenues. But the deal that you all are going to see today is very different. This is unlike previous stadium agreements in which Metro was on the hook to make annual debt payments. In total, the direct investment by Metro Nashville in the construction of this stadium, which in addition to soccer can be used for other sporting and entertainment events, will be comparable to the tax dollars spent on Ascend Amphitheater, less than what was spent on First Tennessee Park, and far less than our city spent on building Nissan or Bridgestone. More importantly, there will be no need for a tax increase to pay for this stadium and no negative impact on the operating budget. We can fully meet our commitments in a future capital spending plan while also meeting the needs of our community, like new schools and sidewalks, paving, and other facilities. I'm going to turn this over to Fairgrounds Director Laura Schlosser. She's going to go into much greater detail about the proposed improvements to the fairground area and how we're going to honor and preserve the historic use of this site, while also modernizing and improving the facilities to benefit the patrons and the vendors. So I'm going to invite Laura to come up here to just talk about the fairgrounds, and then we're going to have some more comprehensive conversation about what this deal actually looks like, and you guys can ask some questions. Thank you. Laura.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for the gracious time in front of you today. and to thank you. Thank you for your past support of the fairgrounds and support that I have every confidence will continue as we move forward. You know, many of you have attended events, you've given feedback, and you've all encouraged us to support our mission, and I want to thank you for that opportunity and the opportunity to speak to you today. The Fairgrounds Nashville connects our community with events. That's our mission statement. That's what we do. We do events and we bring our community to our property. Our strength is in the ability to host a wide array of family-friendly events at an affordable cost, and that is a value that has been shared with us from our customers and from elected officials such as yourself. We estimate that we have over 1.4 million visitors each year to 160 unique events. So when we are fully activating our site, right now we have over 1,250 event days. Oftentimes we are hosting multiple events simultaneously. We're actually pretty good at it. Events like our monthly flea market, our racing season, our Tennessee State Fair that just ended, large expos like the Lawn and Garden Show and Christmas Village, the herb and perennial plant shows, wrestling, roller derby, job fairs, and corporate sales meetings. We host them all, and many of them are proud to call the fairgrounds home. Metro has already made a significant financial commitment towards improvements of the fairgrounds campus, as Mayor Berry referenced in her remarks. To date, several underutilized and unsafe buildings have been removed, and most recently we finished a comprehensive painting program so that all of the exterior of our conditioned spaces have a fresh coat of paint. As we look toward the future, status quo is not acceptable. Improvements to the Speedway, our buildings and infrastructure, our green space, our waterways are vital. An MLS stadium can complement those improvements and will encourage collaborative use of the site. This rendering depicts a similar square footage of conditioned and unconditioned space to what we have currently, but in a new footprint. A design that contributes to the efficiency of space while giving event promoters more flexibility with their event setups. A design that will complement our existing and future events with an added benefit of dual use between the fairgrounds and the stadium. We're in the process of finalizing a multi-year contract with the Fairgrounds Speedway for the operation, maintenance, and improvement of the racetrack. We'll be working with the promoter on the track, concourse, and grandstand improvements, as well as to the existing pit as it stands today. All of these improvements will contribute collectively to the enhancement of the property. We're an active community space and recognize that we have the capacity to draw even more events, more festivals, more fairs, more meetings to the property, and we will engage our user groups as we move forward. I'd like to turn it over to Will Alexander.
Thanks so much, Laura. I'm Will Alexander. I'm the co-founder of MLS to Nashville, which is the group of community leaders that's been supportive of Nashville's MLS bid since the bid kicked off last year. I'm grateful for the chance to talk to all of you all today about this opportunity that's a really historic one for our city. Major League Soccer is a lot like the city of Nashville in that it's never been stronger than it is today. The most recent MLS Cup and MLS All-Star games have had record viewership. The MLS set its single game attendance record last month with 70,000 people in Atlanta. And in August, the MLS entered into a new $700 million apparel contract that was 3 times as big as the previous agreement. The MLS is doing great right now, and it's an intense competition to be one of the next expansion teams in the league. But we think Nashville's up for the task. One question that we get is, how would an MLS team fit into Nashville? Is Nashville ready? And the answer to this question is absolutely. The top line number to look at is 100,000 people went to 2 international soccer games at Nissan Stadium during a 3-week period in July. But just big attendance isn't the whole story. Nashville has a great ecosystem to support soccer at all levels. We've got 40,000 youth players in the Nashville area, and high school soccer players. The numbers has been increasing at a steady clip. So we can confidently say that Music City is Soccer City. Nashville would benefit in a lot of different ways by bringing an MLS team to town. One, most certainly, is economic. The construction of a new venue, the team operations, they would certainly add jobs to the economy, generate income for employees, and generate tax revenue. Soccer is also the world's game, and Nashville is an increasingly international city. An MLS team here would elevate our profile around the country and around the world. The venue also is really important about what it could serve for a community. It would instantly be a really important community asset where more than just the 20 or so MLS games could be played, also concerts and other sporting events could be hosted. And an MLS team would also add to the quality of life in our city. Today, people move to places that they want to live, and then businesses follow the talent. It's important for us to think about how we can make sure that Nashville is an attractive place to live in the years ahead, and an MLS team would go a long way towards doing that. Certainly, tourism would be impacted. We think about the Preds and the Titans. Opponents' fans look at schedules as soon as they come out. Circle Nashville. People like to come here. The same would be the case with visiting soccer fans. And last, but certainly not least, an MLS team here could be a unifier in our community. Anybody that attended the games at Nissan Stadium heard all the different languages and saw all the diversity at those games. Nashville has people moving here all the time from around the country and around the world. Uniting people around a common cause that people understand, like soccer, would go a long way for our community. Now, as I've mentioned, this is a competitive process. There are 12 cities that are going after these expansion slots, but we're feeling really good about where we stand for the following reasons. One, and very important, we've got a really engaged community. Nashville's bid has had a deep community involvement from the beginning and continues to. It took MLS Commissioner Don Garber about an hour or two in town to see that Nashvillians have a can-do attitude, we think big, and we collaborate and work together really well, working on big projects. We've also got the attractive demographics. We might be one of the smaller cities competing for a team, but nobody's growing as fast as we are, and we're also a very diverse city. We've got a strong economy. We've got great job growth, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, the great attendance at the games that we mentioned and the mayor also mentioned, and also the support that we provided the Titans and the Preds. The Titans sold out over 100 straight games when they moved to town. The Predators last year during their playoff run were really the story of the NHL, maybe the story of all of professional sports. We have a globally recognized brand. Few cities in the world can say that. But a team in Nashville would help raise the profile of the MLS and any sports team here because of the entertainment industry. Look at how the Preds harness the music industry for their big playoff run. And then last, our potential corporate sponsors. Again, we may be small, but we've got a large number of big headquarters here. And fortunately, many of these companies are very supportive of this effort. For instance, Jose Munoz, the chairman of Nissan North America, was the first member of the MLS organizing committee. What we have here are some quotes by Commissioner Don Garber of the MLS. As you can see, many are positive about our city. You know, the MLS sees Nashville as a city on the rise, and it's a perfect fit for the MLS, which is a league on the rise. What the missing piece is the stadium plan. And I'd like to introduce John Ingram, who will be the lead investor in Nashville's MLS team, to talk about that.
Thank you, Will. It's a pleasure for me to be back. But before I start, I should say that before we walked in here today, there was some news that came over Twitter that said we had just been awarded an MLS franchise in Nashville. And as much as I wish that were true, any of you that might have seen that, I can assure you it's not true. Imagine that the Twittersphere is, a little bit of fake news. But we have a process, and a big part of it is being here today, and we're delighted to be here. I know that I can imagine that you're very interested in learning more about the details of this financing plan, but I think it's important, or I would like to be able to say to all of you here, why is this interesting to me, and why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think it starts with the fact that I've lived here for almost all of the 56 years I've been on the planet, and I love Nashville, and the things that inspire me and the things that I'm interested in are, I've always loved sports. I love my family and opportunities for them, and I love my city. And the thought of combining all that into a meaningful legacy is really quite powerful. I've said along the way many times, I said, there could be other places and ways to participate in sports ownership, but for me, the only thing that really made sense was to do this in Nashville, with Nashville, and for Nashville. And that's why I'm here. And I think as we progress, as Nashville continues to grow, and as our population becomes more diverse, I think this sport of soccer becomes that much more important. And I would be so bold as to think over the next generation that this could become the most popular major league sport in this city. I really do believe that, and look forward to working in that direction. And as you can see, we have ticked a lot of the key boxes. We have a very strong bid, and you know, a lot of that is attributable to the people that worked hard on this bid. A lot of it's attributable to the momentum and the vibe and the energy that's happening in Nashville. And you know, some of the key pieces, I mean, starting with ownership, MLS likes strong local ownership, and I hope I represent that. The media has reported that we also have another family from Minnesota, the Wilf family, that have joined our bid. The media is mostly focused on the fact that they're another wealthy family. I think the really important part of them joining is that they have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in running sports enterprises. And that is really important when it comes to building stadiums, having them come in on time and on budget. And they have just finished building in the last year or two a $1 billion plus stadium that came in on time and on budget. And I'm really so delighted to have that resource firmly planted in our efforts. And you can imagine that in everything from the fan experience to concessions to parking to on and on. So we've got a really strong ownership presence. And Will mentioned the market. There's a strong grassroots market, but clearly MLS was incredibly impressed by coming down here, meeting with some of our corporate partners who were so engaged, and then seeing the results of those tournaments in tournament games in July. They believe, as we do, that Nashville is a soccer city. And the final piece really comes down to stadium. And you know, we've certainly listened very closely to the advice MLS has been giving us, and they've said unequivocally that no city would be considered without a viable stadium plan. And MLS does not want to play, I should say, MLS average attendance is probably in the 20 to 25,000 range, and MLS does not want to play that in large cavernous NFL stadiums, unless maybe perchance you own the stadium, at which point they've made an exception or two. But they've been very clear to us that unless we had an appropriate stadium, that they would not consider us for a bid. So we're strong. We've kind of, probably when we started this, submitted our bid back in January. If there were 12 cities that were involved, we would have been in the 10 to 12 range, to be honest. MLS was courteous when they met with us, but not very encouraging. And over the course of the last 8.5 months, we have worked hard. We've done what we needed to do. Other cities have failed at moments like this and in other ways. And I feel very, very strongly that if we can come to an agreement on a stadium proposal, then we have a very good chance of being selected in December. And I think that would be very good news long term for Nashville. So To hear more about the actual stadium, I'd like to invite Mary Cavara up. Mary is, in her daytime role, she's the CFO at Ingram Industries, but she's also been moonlighting as really the project manager of this effort, and she's probably going to ask for a little hazardous duty pay at the end of the year when bonus times come around. But Mary, all yours.
Okay. All right, thank you, John. I'll have to remember that. So, just to give you a quick update on our stadium site plan, it's very similar to what we shared with you back in August. However, there's a couple things that I want to point out that as we continue to work through the stadium plan and kind of refine things, first of all, we refined the size, and now we have a 27,500-seat soccer-specific stadium with a natural grass playing field. And through our conversations with MLS, this is really one of the things they're looking at. We understand the other top 4 expansion cities also have natural grass. The second item that Laura kind of alluded to is that the location of the stadium has been moved slightly so that we could better accommodate the fairgrounds programming, and we can truly say that the stadium is integrated with the fairgrounds site. And it kind of creates a great environment, a place for supporters to kind of gather and march into the stadium, which is one of kind of the unique traditions of soccer that's very different from some of the other sports. Thank you. The other item that we've been working on since August is we've engaged Dr. Bill Fox of UT Knoxville, the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Development, to conduct an economic impact study related to the construction of the stadium. And there's really kind of 2 impacts. Up here on the slide is kind of what happens during the operating phase. But before we go through those numbers, that during the construction phase, there's kind of a one-time increase. And so the construction phase is expected to generate over 3,500 jobs with a wage impact of $139 million. Once the stadium is up and running, you could see that almost 1,900 jobs are generated with annual wages of around $78 million and $15 million of annual tax revenue. If you were to take this over 30 years, it's about a $2 billion favorable impact. And the last item that I'm going to cover is kind of the timeline of what this looks like. So we're currently in our October-November timeline of 2017 where we're presenting this to the council. As others have mentioned, in December 2017, MLS, the Board of Governors, is going to award two expansion teams, and we really want to be 2 of those cities. The timeline is that during 2018, we would spend time on the detailed design, the construction preparation, just to make sure that everything could run smoothly, as well as time to, as we work through these finer details, to engage the neighbors and make sure we've thought of those things that need to be covered. There's a couple items up here related to the Fair Board and Sports Authority that Rich will cover in just a moment. If we're awarded a franchise in December of 2017, that team would begin playing in March of 2020, and we would have to find a temporary home for them. But in 2021, that's the timing that we would expect the stadium to be open when the season kicks off in March of that year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rich. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon. Appreciate being here. I think this is as all the speakers, the mayor and the other speakers have said, we think this is a unique opportunity to continue Nashville's growth and development, and we think in a way that works within our pocketbook and the framework of what's in the best interest of all the city. Do you have the clicker? I like to control the clicker. If you all have seen me do these presentations, I like to control it. I think we start at the basics of this, and this is a very different structured transaction than we've seen from other sports venues that we've done in Nashville. This one will be 90% privately financed from private funds or revenues generated from the stadium, and 10% of public dollars. Now I got to figure out how to do this. There we go. The project benefits, we won't dwell on these, we'll let you read these, but clearly economic and job creation, as Mary covered so well. I think as important to the soccer of Nashville is the fairgrounds. We've all been through lots of discussions about the fairgrounds over time. This will result in a dramatic investment in the fairgrounds, improving all the facilities, and continuing its transformation to be an integral part of the city. Located right on Nolensville Road. Obviously, this will be, Nolensville will become a major transit corridor as we look at the transit plans for Nashville going forward. This stadium will be built right on that corridor. Even the MSL, when they were, MLS, when they were in town, asked about transit for Nashville, where we're going with it. Is it something that's in our future, which we'll all be talking about in the weeks to come. With the private development, there'll be a component of affordable housing, which we all know is critical for Nashville's continued success. Most importantly for all of us, this will have minimal fiscal impact to the government, and it will be another asset for our community owned by the Sports Authority and to support the public good. The stadium lease. So getting into some of the specifics of the deal, looking at a 30-year lease of the stadium with the MLS team. The team will cover the debt service, less the reduction from the ticket tax and the sales tax, the redirect of those revenues. Metro's only ongoing fiscal responsibility besides an initial outlay will be basically to cover if there is any revenue shortfall in the first years 1 through 10. We believe that most, if not all, of that will be covered by revenue, sales tax, and the seat charge. Something we heard very clearly from members of this council when we met earlier is that the team will be responsible for any construction cost overruns. The team will operate and manage the stadium on behalf of the Sports Authority and with the responsibility for all the stadium maintenance. And while the city will maintain the long-term need for CapEx on the project, unlike a lot of the other projects we've done, we have built into this structure a mechanism where beginning in year 5, the ticket tax will be increased to provide an ongoing source of funds for CapEx. Legislation. So the Fair Board. Initial steps would be to adopt a resolution approving the ground lease of the site for the stadium to the Sports Authority Metro. And then ultimately they would also agree to enter into a long-term lease on about 10 acres of underutilized fairground property, which would be then used for private development of some kind, including affordable housing. The Sports Authority ultimately will adopt the resolution, initially will adopt the resolution requesting the city for approval to issue the bonds so that they can, to finance the stadium, again, subject to MLS, awarding of the MLS franchise. And what will be before the council is a resolution authorizing the Sports Authority to issue up to $225 million in bonds to build the stadium, and the pledging of the GST non-tax revenues, which are necessary to support the financing of the bonds. What we have built into this structure and in the resolution that comes before the council are some conditions that have to be met before any bonds can be issued. The first of which, and primarily one, is that they have to have the franchise. So if the franchise is not awarded by the MLS, there's no deal. It just doesn't happen. The transaction doesn't occur. There has to be an operating lease agreement between the team and the Sports Authority, which, among other things, again, has the team committing to covering if any construction cost overruns. The ground lease between the Fair Board and the Sports Authority. The city would commit $25 million initially in general obligation bonds for part of the stadium cost, all of which would go into public infrastructure and public areas at the stadium. It's a requirement of the bond of the state laws. So this $25 million is only for public areas and infrastructure. The second $25 million that the city would commit to is for fairground improvements. This is for the rebuilding of the buildings around the site. As you know, until we know exactly where it's going to go and which buildings are going to be changed, we don't know exactly which are going to be torn down. But the $25 million, along with the $12 million that the council previously approved, will provide like $37 million to redo the fairground facilities themselves. Ultimately, the council would have to approve, if you remember the charter amendment, when the charter amendment was passed, it says that, that you have to keep the uses that were there, and that if you tear down or demolish, relocate any of the facilities on the site, the council has to approve that by 27 votes. And so once we identify exactly which buildings have to go down, the council will have to come back to the council and have them approve those buildings that are being demolished. The lease will give the city 20 free days of use of the facility. And I think, as importantly, we'll talk about the need and the requirement for complete cooperation with the fairgrounds regarding its events, so that there is no hindrance of the ongoing fairground activities. So the funding plan. So what does the stadium cost? So the stadium is estimated to cost right at $250 million. And that will be funded $25 million in private dollars. The ownership group was putting $25 million into the project. The city will put $25 million of the general obligation bonds for public infrastructure into the project, and that $200 million will be financed through bonds issued by the Sports Authority. The debt service on the $200 million in bonds is approximately $13 million a year. And of that, we would anticipate the lease agreement requiring about $9 million coming from the team, and the other $4 million we anticipate be coming from the sales tax redirect and the seat tax on the stadium. Over time, that would grow, and obviously, if it's more than $4 million is collected from those two sources, the team's lease payment goes down. But whatever it is, it has to meet the debt service requirements, with the city's commitment only being that any shortfall of up to $4 million in the first 5 years and up to $3 million in years 6 through 10. We anticipate, under sort of modest assumptions, realistic assumptions, that we'll achieve at or close to the $4 million in the first year. I think that covers it. Vice Mayor, questions?
We have about 20 minutes for questions. I did count 29 council members here, pretty good up for 3 o'clock on a Monday. If we could get a copy of the PowerPoint to distribute to those members who are not here, and to just so there's a point of reference. And then I will open it up to questions. Councilman O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I guess, Rich, I'll look to you for...
I'll sort of guide the questions. If there's a better person, I assure you I will find them and ask them to speak.
Very good. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here and for the detailed presentation. I know some of these are probably buried in the finer points, but I'm looking at a couple things, right? So I think I just heard you say this, but if the collections on sales tax at this facility actually run over, it's still redirecting into the facility, right? Those do not return to the general
Under state
fund.
law, you're required that all the sales tax collection are used to debt service. Yes, sir.
And then, as a project more conceptually, right, we have a few of these types of projects in the city at this point, right? If I run from Nissan Stadium through Bridgestone Arena into First Tennessee Park, right, we've got a variety of different types of uses, right? I think most Nashvillians would agree that in many ways Nissan is underutilized as a civic resource, right? And we've just now started to have some concerts show up at First Tennessee Park.
The team is doing a much better job of using all those facilities.
Right. So Bridgestone, for instance, in contrast to the stadium, is one of the top ticket destinations in the world. So I haven't seen a lot of non-team kind of non-soccer uses highlight in this proposal. Do we know what that's going to be? I know it's under Sports Authority. So how does that look going forward?
I would anticipate, and Mary may want to add to that, I think that one of the problems with Nissan Stadium is just its pure size.
Sure.
And there are not a lot of concerts that can support a 50,000 plus seat venue. This is a very different venue, being at 27,000 seats, and we would anticipate a lot of not only civic uses, but concerts, other soccer games, sports activities, yeah, a full gamut. And clearly, the team is incentivized to get more use of this stadium for obviously to their bottom line, and generates more sales tax and more use, which would lower their annual operating costs. So I think you have a mutuality of interest there in terms of trying to maximize the potential at this site.
And then I guess finally, kind of following up on that, right, I think one of the other shortcomings of the lease we arranged with Nissan is that we have effectively stunted riverfront redevelopment on the East Bank for that stretch, right? We have a bunch of surface parking there when redevelopment would have made a lot of sense. I think similarly here, right, we've been through this conversation as a city about future use of the fairgrounds. I think there are a lot of Nashvillians committed to that idea of retaining some of the existing uses there. I know you've mentioned demolition here. Can you speak at all to kind of what the anticipation is beyond the footprint of the stadium, as well as how parking's going to look, transit's going to look, et cetera?
I think there are lots of parking available on the site within the undeveloped areas of the property, both within where the Fair Park is going to go, which is designed to hold parking as well, and on the underutilized areas of the site. I think more importantly, long term, I think we all would envision that there being a major transit stop right across at Nolensville Road in the fairgrounds. It seems like if you're going to do a major transit plan, which we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks, that it's only logical that this would be a major location for where you would have that stop. I think that what Laura sees, and I don't want to speak for her, she may want to add, is that obviously the buildings that we have on the fairgrounds now are very old, very inefficient, both from from a use standpoint, utility costs, as well as just functionality. And to have almost an equal amount of square footage in new buildings that are designed energy efficient will only make the fairgrounds a much more desired business entity in years to come. And that's what we envision with this. What we see is soccer is helping to kickstart the fairgrounds by sort of speeding up the redevelopment of the fairground site, because once you tear down certain buildings, you got to replace them, right? So this will all work much quicker than a longer term redevelopment of the site.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Councilor Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Mayor. I have about 4 questions, and you don't have to answer them now, all right. But I just want to put them out there. I think this is intriguing. Initially, I was not someone who was thinking about soccer and it being a world sport and probably the most popular sport in Nashville. So I thank you all for being here and providing the information. As chair of the Conventions and Tourism Committee, while I am very supportive of tourism and the growth and development, I want to make sure, however, that we take care of our core base of people here in Nashville. It's the Southern charm and the hospitality that our basic core Nashvillians have provided over decades that people come here. So having said that, I want you to know that the best of us must take care of the rest of us.
Understand?
So I have questions asking, how can this project help individuals who cannot afford to attend soccer games? How can they benefit from this? And I know that jobs is probably going to be the #1 way that they can. So we want to make sure that they have jobs other than entry-level jobs, but management level and so forth. I'd like to know how many people of color hold jobs at the fairgrounds currently. I'd also like to know if the fairgrounds provide internships, and if so, the demographics of those in terms of the female, where the people are geographically located in Nashville now, and of course the diversity. You know, the mayor said this is an international city, and I want to make sure that we look like an international city in all that we do. And I'm interested to know if the MLS committee has diversity and what does it look like? I'd like to know the diversity and inclusion that's there. Thank you.
Mr. Riebling, I'm gonna let you take advantage of the opportunity to answer those questions later, because I have 10 other people.
I was hoping to use the last 12 minutes on those questions.
No, you are not.
I indicated that you
I know,
answer
I know.
later.
We've got 10 other people, and our budget and finance agenda has 28 items on it. Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. A couple of quick questions, if you didn't mind, Rich. Activate unused land, 10 acres. What does that mean? Is that third-party private development, or is that going back to the fairgrounds in some ways? Is that a lease arrangement?
Yes, 10 acres would be made available to the ownership group for redevelopment, for development purposes. Yes, sir.
So do the owners of the team
Yes, sir.
have 10 acres?
That's part of the proposal. Yes, sir.
And that, the zoning and the density, so they have a 10-acre development going along with their team?
Right, somewhere on that site, 10 acres would be identified, subject to Fair Board approval, and obviously all of it would require community input and rezoning coming back to the council for approval, because there's no zoning on that property that would.
And is there negotiated financial arrangement on the 10 acres?
That is included as part of as the inducement to do this transaction.
So for their $25 million, they get the team, the stadium, and 10 acres?
Well, $25 million plus an annual commitment of $9 million towards the lease payment, plus the obligations to operate and maintain the stadium. So yes, it's more than just that.
So, but they're not guaranteeing the debt, or are they guaranteeing the $9 million?
There will be some form of team guarantee for their payment, yes.
Okay, but, okay, thank you. And then another quick question, if you didn't mind, for the council. The work ahead of us, what do you see as the council having to get done before December? Is this a resolution? Is this an ordinance?
Yes, sir. The legislation will be filed. I should have said this earlier. I apologize. The legislation will be filed today or tomorrow, which is a resolution that essentially authorizes the Sports Authority to issue the revenue bonds to support the stadium cost, subject to the conditions that I talked about today, and you'll see it in the legislation, getting the franchise and a satisfactory lease agreement and things of that nature.
So a one-meeting resolution on basically extension of the CSP to authorize the borrowing for the Sports Authority?
I'm not sure I understand what that CSP is.
Well, the capital spending plan?
No, this is a resolution authorizing the Sports Authority to issue $200 million in Sports Authority revenue bonds.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
And if I could just clarify a little bit, it's my understanding that the council would need to act on that no later than the first meeting of November. Is that right?
That's correct. The timing, again, is the MLS is looking towards making a decision in early December on the two franchises, and the sooner we get an agreement, assuming it was approved by the council, then it could be submitted to the MLS for them to kick the tires and do their research before they would grant the award hopefully in December.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, well, apparently my math is terrible, because when we say it's a 90-10, when I'm looking at it, if the Sports Authority is going to issue $200 million in revenue bonds,
yes, sir,
and we're putting in $25 million in general obligation bonds, the private industry is putting in $25 million. I'm not coming up with a 90-10 here.
That's $250 million of total cost.
Right.
The city's out-of-pocket obligation is $25 million in general obligation bonds. The $200 million of bonds are going to be repaid by the private lease payment and revenues generated from the seat tax and the sales tax rebate. So yes, 90-10.
So with the potential, though, of another $35 million that the taxpayers may be responsible for in shortfalls of lease payments between year 1 and year 10.
That would be the absolute max if nobody came to any games and they sold not one ticket. Yes, sir.
And if we do a downturn in the economy where the sales tax revenues drops drastically like it did a few years ago, what assurances do we have if ticket sales fall off, the sales tax revenues are not where they're supposed to be, what do the taxpayers of Nashville have as their guarantee that if a bankruptcy is filed or something else, we're not on the hook for additional dollars?
Well, we would have that's the reason why we structured this with a maximum for the city liability. We have team guarantee of the lease payment. So, I mean, I think we have done everything that is reasonable to minimize any potential downside for the city.
Okay, then I want to go back because I'd like to understand a little bit better about the 10-acre allotment for the development there. So it's a part of the package. I guess if you could, I'd like to understand the package a little bit better because I'm not making 2 and 2 equal 4 here. So if we could, I'd like a little bit additional information on that. And then the other thing that concerns me, and I think it concerns a lot of people in the city right now, we're getting ready to be asked for a referendum on billions of dollars for a transit bill. Right now, we're subsidizing transit to a tune of about 75 cents on every dollar that's being spent. And so at some point, we reach a point where we can't handle any more expenditure. And so that's the areas that concerns me because we are opening ourselves up for additional debt dangers, I'll call it. And then, because I don't see the numbers as far as understanding what the sales tax revenues projections would be, et cetera. I'll look forward to seeing that.
Happy to sit down and walk through those details with you, but I think we can, I feel pretty confident that we can get you there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Elrod.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Eveling and Mayor Berry for being here. I just want to say, first of all, I hope for, like a lot of folks in the room, I'm a supporter of bringing soccer to Nashville, but the questions that I've had are just around the financing of the stadium. I just want to couch my comments with that. The first, I really have just 2 general questions, at least initially. With the first Tennessee stadium, with the audit that was done after that, there was recognized that there were some cost overruns from the initial price tag on that, and a lot of that came to deal with public works, infrastructure, utilities cost. What kind of protections are in place on this project or safeguards that wouldn't happen, or that there would be additional authorization needed by the council for those kind of expenditures?
Good question. The $25 million is the city's commitment on the general obligation debt to fund some public infrastructure, and the lease agreement is required to have language in it that says that the team is responsible for any cost overruns. That's simple.
Okay, I may need to dive more into how those cost overruns happen on the First Tennessee Park to make sure that doesn't happen here. But that
I understand. Very different structure, and
sure.
I understand I understand what you're getting at, and that's the reason why, based on when we sat down with the council a few weeks ago and did the initial presentation, we heard that repeatedly, and that's why this is a different deal than that one, and it's one in which the team has agreed to step up to cover any of those cost overruns. I mean, one of the other differences in this is that this project is not on the construction side, is not on sort of the breakneck schedule that the other one was on, and that we will have more time to develop full construction drawings and all the necessary work before we go forward on it, and make sure that the costs are known and brought down, before we actually start digging the project. So it's some differences.
Thank you. I do want to give, I'm not supporting it or opposing it now. I do have many questions about it still, but I do want to give y'all credit that you have at least in the proposal so far, I've seen that y'all have tried to go to some lengths to address some of the concerns that we have about protecting Metro and trying to make it as much of a private partnership as possible. So I do appreciate that and want to acknowledge that.
I'm sure our concerns are the same as yours.
Sure. The second question I have is the private development with the Turner family and on the Fairgrounds property, and that we'll basically turning over some land to them to develop. And I guess I have a couple of questions is, why is that a part of this project at all, and how were they selected, and what is your, I guess, general thought process of why that is included with this stadium deal, and why we need to approve it, and why it is necessary to this?
The 10 acres is part of the overall package for the transaction. As you can look through this, and as you study it a little more carefully when you have time, not just hearing our words or seeing it, the private operation on this has stepped up to take over a vast bulk of the cost of this to mitigate the damage, the potential liability to the city. As part of that, they asked for, and we agreed to, some acreage for the development. I would say that the right to develop that will go to the team, right, and they will sign it to whomever they want, Turners, whomever. There is a requirement that there be some level of affordable housing in that development, which we think is important for the city going forward. And frankly, we think it is an incentive and will help the overall community. The city will get the tax dollars off that redevelopment. None of those tax dollars are pledged to any of the obligations that we've talked about for the debt, so the city's going to get the benefit of that. And we feel that when you look at the merits and of what's being done by the private developer, by the private ownership side, that's not an unreasonable request, and we think will actually be in the best interest of the city long term.
So the
Point that I would clarify.
Oh, just a moment. There you go.
The one item that I would clarify is that the Turner family is part of our ownership group here, that they're longstanding Nashvillians and want to do the right thing here. Just like the Wilf team brought in some of the sports expertise, these guys have plenty of experiences that we've seen around our city and development, and we'll be working with the ownership group.
So, forgive me, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, is that we're giving X number of acres, I forget how many, for the entire stadium project to the ownership group, and that land will then be used for the stadium, and then also this private development.
Well, no, the land for the stadium goes to the Sports Authority, ground lease to the Sports Authority. Remember, the city owns the stadium site. The only land that would be entered into a long-term lease with a private entity would be the 10 acres or so, which would be which in question that you're talking about.
Okay, and forgive my generalization, it's I guess to help make the ownership group, I guess, have some more profit from the site to help pay for their costs in running the team.
I think it's fair. I mean, that's part of the overall negotiations. I mean, this has not been something we did overnight.
Sure.
In terms of discussions. But I think it does provide some upside, so to speak, for the ownership group. But I also think it provides upside for the city in that we're going to get some tax dollars for development and affordable housing element, and actually help revitalize an underutilized area, an underutilized part of the property. So I think there are benefits to the city from this as well, not just to the private development side.
Sure. And
Councilman, I'm going to ask you to cut it off. Thanks. I've got 8 other people. Council Lady Vercher, I'm now eating up your time, but I'm going to go for a minute with your consent. Councilman Schulman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Mr. Ebling, 2 quick questions. Affordable housing, you mentioned. What percentage? Do we know what it is?
We don't. I mean, because there's no site plan. Nothing's been negotiated yet other than 10 acres somewhere on the site. Okay. All that's going to have to come back through the community process, through the Fair Board, and ultimately have to come back to the council in the form of rezoning. So there's some checks, some balances, some checks built into this, so we'll have more comfort on it going forward.
But there's no certain allotment?
No,
sir, not yet. And then in terms of the road construction, you talked about obviously infrastructure. Road improvements, how are we going to do with the traffic, that type of thing?
The road would be part of the $25 million. A portion of that would come from the city's commitment on the public infrastructure, includes roads.
And do we know what that is? I mean,
I don't have it in front of me. I'll get you that breakdown. I don't have any of that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Council Lady Weiner.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I appreciate it, and thank you to everybody for being here today. I'm intrigued by the proposal as I've watched firsthand all the increasing soccer activity in Bellevue through the Harpeth Youth Soccer Association. And so, having spoken with those parents at length, I am really, as I said, intrigued by this. I've got just a couple of operational and financial questions, if you don't mind. and you don't have to answer today. You can get them to me anytime you're ready. So my first question would be, in light of 1,250 days of activities, I'm assuming that we already have a plan in place or will have a plan in place to mitigate the displacement of those events. And I would be curious if we could have that shared with us when that's ready.
Yeah, I don't think we have exactly the plan, but I know Laura's been thinking about it a lot, and so we'll get back to you on that details, yeah.
Okay, so my second question would be, at some point also I'd like you to speak and take a little bit deeper dive into the GSD non-tax revenues and specifically what that looks like. So that would be my second question. My third question is, can we get a copy of Dr. Fox's report from UT?
Sure. Right? There's no issue with that, is that right? Yes, yes.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
It'll be up on the website tonight.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
MLS Nashville website, I should say. But we'll get it on. We'll put all this on our website as well. When we put the PowerPoint, all that, we'll include it in all that as well.
Councilor Dowell.
Thank you. I just had two quick questions, and you can get back with me on both of these. The first question is, are you able to provide to us accounting of all the bonds we have pledged with regard to? I know we've done convention center, that's about $1 billion. The term on that and how much we paid in. I know we get the report every month, but I'd like to have one just all put together with all of these on it. The convention center, Nissan Stadium, because I recall we did the $25 million for the screens, and there was some concern then that the term on those bonds exceed the contract that the football team had with us. So I want to see that. Also, the Sound Stadium, if you could provide that on the same report and let us know like how we're generating the revenue to pay those back on those items. The other question I have is, are we going to require any type of reserve from, I know that when we did the convention center, if I recall, they put a certain amount of funds in reserve to handle the obligation, the debt obligation for the first couple of years. That way, if they did not meet the revenue goals, then we had some money in reserve that was put up front, I thought, to cover that so that the city is not liable or at risk for the shortfalls in the first few years of operation.
I think the only, I'll go back and double check. I believe the only reserves were what was called capitalized interest, which basically covers your debt service payments, interest payments while the project is being built. We would structure this similar to that. Similar
to that?
Yeah.
Okay. And also, are you able to look and see, one of my concerns is that two things, and I'm closing out, is one is that I know that this is private funds. However, it's backed by the full faith and credit of the issuing municipality, which is Davidson County. And so I want to know what impact this will have on our credit rating, if any, and have you thought about that? If you could.
Right. It does not have the full faith and credit of the city behind it. It only has the pledge of the non-tax revenues, like the convention center. And as long as it's all about coverage, and we believe we have more than ample coverage, but we'll get you more information on that.
But if they don't pay, if we don't generate the revenue, they go bankrupt, what happens? Who's responsible for paying that?
The city would be ultimately
responsible. Okay, so that's the point I'm making on that we'll be responsible. The last thing I just ask you consider, I know at the federal level, I'm on the policy committee, and they've been talking about how we issue these revenue bonds to fund public facilities. And really, they made these tax-exempt bonds for the purposes of more infrastructure type projects like bridges and overpass and transit, things that we need in this community right now desperately. And I know there's been some conversation about removing that tax exempt part on these bonds. And I want to know, I know that's still active in Congress right now. How would that impact you?
Yeah, actually, the majority of these bonds will probably be taxable because of the private payment coming from the lease payment. The only portion that could be tax exempt is the portion that's from the sales tax. So it'll be probably 70-30 taxable to tax exempt.
Thank you.
Councilor Lady Blaylock.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Is there any way that we could get maybe a first right of refusal if the ownership team decides to sell in, that 10 acres in 10, 20 years?
Well, they're going to have a ground lease on that, so the city's going to maintain the ownership. The Fair Board would keep ownership of the property long term. So you're saying if they would, after they develop, if they would sell it?
Right.
Let's think on that a little bit, how that will work.
Okay, and so I think there's some flood zone there. Have we done like testing or drilling? Can we even do these items?
Yeah, we're pretty clear. We know where the flood area is and where you can build and can't build. And so I know Laura's dealt with this on the site plan. We can clearly show you where you can and can't build on the site. We can share that with you.
I'm assuming they're going to do like a sky rise on this 10 acres. So
I mean, it would. I honestly could say that I don't think anyone knows yet what they're going to do there. I think I've had one meeting and they've conceptually moved some dots around, but I think that's really going to come, once we know if this deal goes forward. There'll be plenty of time to study that.
Okay. And what are we going to do with the team in 2010 or 2020 after hopefully we get awarded?
I think that's a combination of First Tennessee Park, perhaps Vanderbilt, Nissan for a couple games. I mean, I think it would be a good problem to have.
Thank you.
Council Lady Mina Johnson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I do appreciate everybody else's question. I do appreciate Council Lady Hart's the statement and question, because when we are trying to tackle this great project, we really have to think about the less fortunate. So I would like to hear what, as a city, we have planned to take care of, especially financially less fortunate population with this great program. And I do appreciate the framework. But I'm, as council member, the other council member would like to see the detail, because 25 million direct investment from the city with 200 million revenue bond. I would like to know how that 90-10 mathematics works, and it would be great if you would share those financial worksheet prior to November, so we will know exactly what kind of financial plan we will be approving or disapproving with. And also on that direct investment, we will be investing in your mathematics 90-10%. Do we have opportunity to have in the future revenue sharing opportunity? And if there is, I would like to have what kind of future revenue sharing opportunity might be. So prior to November, the resolution, that would be great. And one last question is, of course, we would like to have MLS awarded the soccer stadium deal, but we will be, if we were jump into the deal and back up this deal and write the resolution, and by any chance, if we are rejected, we are already jump into the, with the MLS, and if we were not awarded the soccer team in this go-around, are we getting into soccer business without awarded? So
No.
Okay.
No. Everything is conditioned. No bonds can be issued. Nothing can be done unless a franchise is awarded. So we have that built-in protection. That's the first condition that triggers anything else.
We have 3 more speakers. We'll go till about 4:15. There are a lot of questions about the financing. I spoke to Mr. Jameson, and if he doesn't have the resolution today, he'll probably have it tomorrow. So I would encourage you to get questions to him so that he can work with the administration and MLS for Nashville to get those answers as soon as possible. Councilman Kendall.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions and maybe comments. But one's a follow-up of Council Lady Hurt regarding employment opportunities. Just want to make sure that the city has some input and influence, a bullet pulpit or whatever you want to call it, regarding employment for minorities. Nashville's population is about 20 to 25% African American, and we only share in about 2.8% of the contracts that are awarded relative to the city at this point, and certainly we're looking for ways to increase that. The other thing relates to Councilman Schulman's question regarding affordable housing. If we're talking about granting 10 acres for development, how do we ensure that a substantial portion, I don't know what percentage it would be, would actually be for affordable and workforce housing? Experience shows that when development goes up around these stadiums, it's generally marketplace housing. First Tennessee, for example, a stadium, and not workforce and affordable housing? How do we ensure, I know it had to come back for zoning, but just coming back for zoning does not ensure that we're going to really have workforce housing in that development.
I think we can get you those assurances. I know that the Turners, if they are the developers of the property, are committed to that, and we can work out those details to give you more information between now and when you're expected to ask to vote on it.
Councilman Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin, for being here. Just two quick questions I have. I didn't hear it. On the leasing of this property, how much are they paying us for that, and what is that property worth?
There's like $1 a year lease. It's a nominal lease. That's part of the overall package to do the transaction. We have an appraisal on the Fairgrounds property, and it's basically the property on the Fairgrounds is about $1 million an acre is the value.
Right. And has there been a discussion about the state fair anymore? Would that be just done away with
Well,
now?
there'd be the ability to do the fair on the site. That would be up to, you obviously have to change where it's structured, but I believe from talking to Laura that all of the current uses on the site would be accommodated. Okay. Obviously, we have a contract with the current operator to run the fair through 2018, which won't be a problem because the construction wouldn't start till after that. There's a state fair board that's trying to determine what they want to do long-term with the state fair, and we'll just have to see where that goes.
You know how much revenue the state fair is bringing in per year, or do we know that?
Laura, do you know that?
Just as
130 to 150,000, she said.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Bedney, you're it. Wrap it up.
No, we will not commit to bring the Argentine. Yes, we will.
Okay.
We'll try real hard.
I'm very excited about this project. If anything, I want to know, how do we ensure that we can expand this stadium as it grows in success and we need more seats on it? Are you guys, it's a question for the architects to look at expansion in the future. I also wanted to ask, what about women's soccer? And also, I mean, because the best women players in the world are Americans from the U.S., so we gotta, it's true. So we gotta make sure that we give them a home as well. And the last question is, I would like to know what the Fairgrounds people feel about the project. But those are questions you don't need to answer now, but I'd like to know. But I'm very excited. I'm very proud that we're going to get a stadium. You guys don't know this, but I don't want to tell you a lot because the vice mayor will kick me, but I play over 40 and over 50, over 30 and over 40 soccer, and I was the only immigrant playing on this team. Most of the people I play were Anglos from here. And so you guys don't know how many of the people you live around in Nashville are soccer players and love to play soccer.
Thank you, Councilman Bedney. I'm going to turn it over now to Council Lady Virtue for Budget and Finance, but before I do, I want to thank Mayor Berry for coming to us to talk to us about this. It's always good when the council hears it first. I don't know, Mr. Garrison, how you didn't get it, but you didn't. Mr. Riebling, thank you. Especially as a personal note, I want to say thank you to Mr. Ingram and Mr. Alexander for coming. For those of you who have paid attention, these projects in the past generally have not been proposed by residents of our fair city, and it's good to see that we're considering one from Nashvillians. So thank you.